I'm Dr. Chris Samuels, a licensed psychologist, and I've been treating sexual addiction for more than 30 years. And in that time, I've noticed something that happens in almost every first session with a client. A man walks into my office, he's just been caught, or he finally disclosed, or he hit some bottom he can't rationalize away. And somewhere in that first conversation, he says something like this: I don't know who I am anymore. I thought I knew myself. I thought I had values. And now I'm looking at what I've done and I don't recognize this person. What he doesn't realize is that he's just described the core problem of sexual addiction, not the behavior itself, which of course is reprehensible. Instead, the identity confusion that makes recovery feel impossible. Today, I want to explain what that confusion is about and why it exists and why understanding it is the key to recovery. Here's what's happening in that moment of confusion. This man has spent years, maybe decades, living as two completely different people, and he really didn't know it. One self shows up for work, coaches Little League, has dinner with his family, makes love to his wife. That self has values. It cares about honesty and connection. It wants to be a good person. The other self shows up late at night or in hotel rooms on business trips or in locked bathrooms with a phone. That self lies reflexively. It prioritizes escape over everything. It'll sacrifice the marriage, the job, the self-respect, anything to maintain access to the behavior. Most men assume these can't both be real. One must be the performance, the mask. And in the shame of discovery, they conclude the addict is who I really am. Anything else was fake. But that's not what's actually happening. Both selves are real. And until you understand that, recovery doesn't make sense. Let me tell you what I see when I take a detailed history. This isn't speculation. This is a pattern I recognize from decades of clinical work. Almost every man with sexual addiction has a version of this story. Somewhere in childhood, something went wrong emotionally. Maybe it was overt trauma, abuse, neglect, chaos in the home. Sometimes it's more subtle. A father who was physically present but emotionally absent, or showed up with a lot of scary anger. A mother who was overwhelmed and couldn't tune in to his needs. A family where feelings weren't allowed or emotions were dangerous. That child learns, I'm on my own. No one's coming. I have to figure out how to manage my pain, my loneliness, myself. And then he discovers, sometimes early, sometimes later, something that helps: sexual feelings, sexual fantasy, sexual behavior. They work, of course, until they don't, but they soothe, they excite, they take him out of the pain for a moment. They give him a sense of control when everything else feels chaotic. That's not moral failure. That's adaptation, survival, a coping mechanism. The addict self forms and develops to protect the child from unbearable emotional states. The problem is this coping mechanism never updates. 30 years later, it's still using the same solution. And what protected a wounded child is now destroying an adult life. The problem solver has become the problem. Meanwhile, the healthy self develops too. It goes to school, learns to work, forms relationships. It builds a life. It has genuine love for people, real values, authentic goals. It's work to achieve those things. But here's the trap. The healthy self doesn't realize the addict self exists. Well, it knows something's wrong, but it thinks the problem is willpower or stress management or needing to be more present in the marriage. So the healthy self makes promises. I'll never do this again. Starting tomorrow, I'm different. This is the last time. And it means it. In that moment, the healthy self is genuinely in charge. It fully intends to keep that promise. But then the addict self gets triggered. Stress hits, loneliness surfaces. The halt states, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, create an opening. And the addict self doesn't care about yesterday's promises. It has one job: escape the pain, get the relief, protect the behavior. The healthy self wakes up afterward, looks at what happened, and concludes, I'm just worthless. I have no integrity. I can't trust myself. But that's not true. The healthy self does have integrity. It just doesn't know it's in a war. When I'm working with someone early in recovery, one of the first things we do is map out which self is active when. We track it because awareness is the beginning and basis of change. I'll ask, what was the addict's voice? What was it saying right before you acted out? And they'll report things like, I've been good all week. I deserve a break. My wife's going to leave anyway. What's the point? I'll just look for 5 minutes. I can control it. That's the addict's self's propaganda. It's seductive, it's familiar, and it's designed to weaken the healthy self's resolve just enough to create an opening. Then I ask, well, what did you feel the next morning? And they'll say, I hated myself. I couldn't look at my kids. I wanted to just disappear. That's the healthy self, the part that has values that are being violated, the part that's grieving what the addict self just did. Once someone can recognize this pattern, oh, that's my addict self talking, not my healthy self, they'll gain the ability to interrupt the forward momentum into negative behaviors. Not perfectly, not every time, but increasingly. If you're a partner watching this, here's what I want you to understand from a clinical perspective. It's clear that your partner's addict self has caused real damage. The trauma you're experiencing is completely legitimate. The shattering of trust is not your fault. And you don't owe him rapid forgiveness or instant trust. But clinically, here's what happened. You married his healthy self, the man who was tender with you, who showed up for your family, who you felt genuinely connected to. That was real. His healthy self loves you. What he didn't fully know is that an addict self was also operating, hidden, compartmentalized, systematically undermining everything his healthy self was building. You didn't miss warning signs. You couldn't have detected this through intuition or vigilance. He'd spent years hiding it from himself. Of course he could hide it from you. And if you're trying to decide whether to stay, you're not choosing whether to love a monster or a saint. You're deciding whether his healthy self has become strong enough to finally take charge, whether he's doing the necessary work to own these two parts so that he can interrupt the addict self from running the show. That's a crucial question, and only you can observe and answer it. Recovery isn't about eliminating the addict self. You can't just cut out a part of yourself. It formed for a reason, and it's deeply embedded. Recovery is about the healthy self recognizing when the addict self is active, understand its tactics, and consistently choose differently. What's essential to make this happen? Therapy that addresses the underlying trauma that created the addict self, accountability structures, 12-step work, sponsors, disclosure, transparency agreements, keep the healthy self honest and present. Daily practices that strengthen healthy self-functioning, connection instead of isolation, honesty instead of deception, reaching out instead of acting out, working to build a life that meets real needs in real ways. What I tell people in treatment is this: your addict self protected you when you had no other options. It's not the enemy. It's a wounded part of you that's still trying to help, but using a strategy that no longer works. Your job isn't to hate it, it's to acknowledge it, understand it, and let your healthy self take over leadership. The man who walks into my office asking, "Who am I?" eventually discovers he's both the person who acted out and the person who grieves that he did. And recovery is the process of deciding which self leads from here forward. For those struggling, your healthy self is what got you to watch this video. It's what makes you search for answers, even when the addict self says it's hopeless. That's not nothing. That's everything. So that's the work. And it begins the moment someone stops believing he's 100% addict.